Okay, music. So I just have to say, that picture was taken before I joined Fox, and now I have about 50% gray hair. Thank you, Bettina. It's all because of you. Hi everybody, I'm Julie. This is my first time as a moderator, so it's a little confession. I've never done this, and probably because I like to argue. And when Bettina asked me to do this, I said, you understand, this is like torture for somebody like me, because I have to ask questions and then be quiet. So, and by the way, guys, I have a foul mouth, so I can't promise that that's going to be clean all the way through. But I will do my best on both fronts. So I'll give you a little bit about myself, and then I would really like for these guys to talk about themselves for just a tad, just a little bit. And then we'll get on to the questions. I am currently the EVP of Media at Fox. I have Cheryl's old job, and I live down the street from Cheryl. So I'm Cheryl Stalker, and now I'm the moderator for her panel. I also am an adjunct professor at USC. I teach entertainment marketing, and I do have a student here. Nadeem, raise your hand. This guy is fantastic. He's my teaching assistant. He's here tonight. Tonight. Like a stand-up show. And I think that other important things you need to know about me is that I'm a Leo, and my favorite color is purple. Are there any Leos in the room? Excellent. Purple? All right. Any Trojans? All right. So that is so more than you need to know about me. So we will start a panel if you just give us your thing.
Hello, I'm Ben Carlson, and I'm the president and co-creator of Physiology, and we do social media research.
Okay, and I'm Cheryl Idell, and I'm EVP of Client Solutions at Nielsen, which means a whole host of things. I'm responsible for leading our client relationships out here at the LA office, and I'm also responsible for our NRG business, which a lot of you in the film industry are familiar with for all the tracking research and all of that.
Hi everyone, my name is Reggie Panaligan. I'm the lead analyst on the film and television business at Google, where we organize the world's information. I think that's the shortest way to describe it.
So here's the rule for this panel, is I expect a fist fight.
Yikes.
I expect to see, or I hope to see, a nerd fight happen, because these guys are probably the smartest ones in the room. I know that Cheryl's certainly the smartest one in my neighborhood. And I think that the panel before us really introduced this one very nicely, because I think what's probably been established so far today is that all of our jobs are harder. They're more complicated, they're more difficult, and what you need in a time like this is you need very succinct, very actionable information. Research, I mean, the research is key. In fact, we decided that we want to change our panel title to Making Metrics Sexy. Everybody okay with that? Because there we go. See, you need a little feedback, guys. So we've established how complicated our jobs are. So what we're going to do is we're going to discuss really these guys are going to discuss about campaign delivery, campaign effectiveness, how to get all of this information together, again, to make these better decisions. So we're going to start out with the first question, which will be as things, again, we got more complicated, there's a theme. How does your company help inform the folks in charge, folks like me, of spending the media dollars that they're going to do the right thing? And please use some examples. Hit it, let's start with a fight now.
Well, I'll go first. We at Physiology, we listen to social media across Facebook, Twitter, blogs, increasingly Instagram, Tumblr, all the different platforms, all the different places audiences are talking about films. So we're involved from the very beginning, from casting all the way through, and hitting the major marketing beats, especially with media, is critical. And what we do is map that social conversation against the media spend to be able to see exactly what is moving the needle and how different audiences are responding to a movie, to the different creative ads against a film, and what's working hardest for each of the audience segments that they're trying to reach through the media. As I was thinking through all the different examples that I could actually cite, I am under NDAs with, I think, most of the people in the room, so it'll be hard to cite specific examples, but we've done everything from sit in a studio's war room around the Super Bowl to be able to see in real time how audience were reacting to that spend, and then what to push out digitally right after the game to be able to take advantage of that 3.5 million whatever dollar spent in the Super Bowl, down to when you're doing those big summer movie placements in the NBA Finals, understanding how men in particular are responding to different creative that you're using as you move through the media buy, and trying to surface those insights and give that feedback fast enough so it can actually impact later spend and make the buy with increasingly challenged budgets in a fractured landscape more efficient and work harder.
So part of my overall theme that you'll hear about me talking about today is sort of blending this big data thing and this data that sort of coincidentally happens online or that's gathered as you're sorting through all the data in the world with solid consumer research as well. Not to say one or the other is better, but putting them together so that you're also getting representative samples, that kind of thing, and able to get to all kinds of information. So there isn't sort of one way to do it. There isn't going to be one metric. But a very specific example, this is in the TV world, of ways that we help television clients, and everyone's familiar with the Nielsen TV ratings. TV ratings are the sales data for television networks, right? That's really what you're doing business, what you're trading on. And so when a marketing department of a television network is promoting their own content, right? They're trying to drive sales. They're trying to drive tune-in. Laurel talked about that. Laurel talked about the fact that intent isn't enough. She actually needs you guys who are selling to her to prove that people actually watched, that you drove her sales metric, which is ratings. So one of the things that we're able to do is actually tie together people who we know were exposed to a network's marketing campaign, online and on television. So we know if folks in our panels were exposed to the TV promos, pretty simply, and we know if they're exposed to the digital promos or the digital ads as well, through tagging those ads and watching those appear. And then we can actually track whether or not folks have tuned in who've been exposed. So it is a really straightforward measure of success to help them understand not only how should they spend their paid advertising dollars, but how should they use their own on-air or online inventory, which has a tremendous value to them as well. Right? Because even though they're not laying money out of their pocket, it's inventory they're either not selling to an advertiser or that they could be using more effectively. So that's one very clear example of how we drive a very explicit recommendation on what's working to actually drive tune-in for TV.
Right. So at Google and YouTube, I think there's really three major categories in which we help to inform the people in this room. The first, and obviously the biggest one, is campaign performance. So Google and YouTube as a company it's built on data. So we provide a treasure trove of information that are available to marketers to really assess the effectiveness of their campaigns, both paid advertising and non-paid advertising. For instance, if you upload content onto YouTube, a film trailer, you will be able to see what demographics really pop for that trailer. You get to see, what devices is that trailer really being viewed upon. A various number of different data points that we provide our clients in terms of campaign performance. The second category where we really help is also on the creative front, optimizing creative. So oftentimes our studios use YouTube as, in essence, a real-time focus group. Actually, all focus groups are real-time. But a real-time online focus group to see really where within a piece of content people start to drop off. What really resonates within a video to the core audience. So again, it's a creative platform. And lastly, and this is sort of a new push that we've been providing with our clients, is using Google search information as a gauge of interest in film. It's essentially another way to track interest in your film, same way that Physiology uses social information and Nielsen uses their whole ecosystem.
Whatever we use.
Whatever
that stuff
you,
is.
I'll let you describe that.
There it goes. It's going to break out now.
Yeah, she's tough. She's tough. So yeah, I think those are the ways that we at Google and YouTube aim to inform.
So I thought that was the softball question, but we've already got a little action going on. That's good. So speaking of numbers, everybody in this room, we are slaves to numbers. Our industry is a slave to numbers. So are the bigger numbers the better? Or is there a way, because I've been you deal in some smaller numbers, and Reggie, you deal in bazillions. We've all heard your pitches. And Cheryl, you deal with everything in between. So is bigger better, or is there an art to looking at numbers where maybe smaller is better?
Well, I think that everybody says they want big data, and then big data lands on their desk, and they say, now what the hell do I do with this? I think that's really what has changed the most in what we do and on the services we provide over the 4 years that we've been in business, is not just having the data we provide, the actual research, the analytics land with a thud on a desk, but being able to help interpret it, because we've had cases where some very big numbers have pointed a way and a path that we're able to recommend for a client that helps a movie be successful. We've had other instances where it has been something small, a single tweet that may spark an idea, spark something that you can put out in marketing and have catch fire. Ultimately, the goal is the same. You want movies to find audiences. You want TV shows to find audiences. And I think that it's not just about the size of the data that helps you find that audience. It's the quality and finding the true narrative. Narrative was a word I was really scared of as a researcher for a long time, because when you combine data and analytics and storytelling, it feels like all of a sudden you're putting too much of yourself into it. But as long as the data is sound, the methodology is sharp, and you are reflecting honestly what the audiences are saying, that narrative that you tell through the research, regardless of the size of the data set, is really what seems, from our perspective, most helpful to the clients.
So I thought by bigger, you didn't necessarily mean bigger data, but bigger box office and bigger sort of media buys and reach and frequency and all that good stuff. And so first of all, I would say that, bigger is better, because no matter what, I think it was Doug that said it, a lot of the money is still spent on TV because you've still got to reach an awful lot of people in an awfully short amount of time to move them. And you probably have to reach even more than you had to in the past, in fact, to move them. And there's only certain ways to do that. But big is relative. Big for a niche horror film release is still big within its world. So it's still a big piece of that pie. The pie is just smaller, versus big if you've got a big 4-quadrant movie or a huge primetime launch event sort of thing. So I do think that bigger is still better, because no matter what, lots of little things take a long time to accumulate and take a long time to make an impact. So there's going to always be a case for that, but big is relatively shrinking. But there's still also always a case for then targeting, right? And finding the influencer in that niche group, and now more than ever, you can find that influencer and amplify the message much more quickly if you're able to do that and target in on the right person. So then it's worth a higher CPM if you can actually find those influencers. I mean, we do that through Social Guide, which is a tool that we have, where we're looking at all the conversation around television, we're looking at all the conversation around movies, and you know that those are the people that you can actually get to amplify your message. So it is worth more to find them and spend money on them, because every dollar you spend on them might be worth $50 versus every dollar that you spend on somebody who's not going to influence someone else. So I don't know if that really answers the intent of your question, but.
So far, you guys are answering both as good.
Julie, you're going to hate me, but I'm going to agree.
I could.
I'm going to agree with Cheryl and not fight her on this one. The bigger the number, no matter what it is you're looking at, whether it's tracking, whether it's Google search information, a month up to a week before your release, or whether it's kind of social engagement, is not necessarily always better, but it is usually better. And whenever you're looking at a number, it is always about context. What does that number mean relative to other similar films when you're looking at tracking or any of these metrics. What does that mean in terms of the overall landscape or the timing of this release? Does it, what else aside from the theatrical competitive landscape is happening at this time that may drive a number up or down? It's always about context, and particularly in this industry, we're not selling umbrellas when it rains. We are selling art, and there is always going to be an art element to this that, I think we're kind of smart on this panel, but we can't always quantify these sort of exogenous factors, and I think that's sort of the reality.
So we use data before we launch campaigns, whether it be television or film. We use data while we're in flight for films, and we also use data to try to predict. So the television guys use it to try to predict what they think their ratings will be. We in film try to use it to try to predict what our box office will be. So all three of you actually use different methodologies.
Which is why we probably don't sleep very well on Friday nights.
So who's right? So why don't you guys
Duke it out?
duke it out, poke holes in each other, because I think this is actually really important. I know at my desk that I get reports from you, and there's other reports that I get too. And they're all different. They're all different answers. They rarely agree with one another. And so talk about using data as a predictor.
Well, you're right, of course, Julie.
Do what?
I said you're right. That's who's right. You need all the pieces of it to triangulate. So I would say that that nobody's right. Not one piece of data is right, and you have to be a really smart user of the information as a guide. I'm not quite sure what good just predicting box office is. So one of the questions that I actually had for you is this new Google search can predict box office. It's a little bit of who cares, because don't you want to affect and impact box office? Because if all you're doing is predicting it, then you may as well go home, because what else is there for you to do if it's already saying what the box office is going to be?
I could go to the Pottery Studio, go bowling.
I think there's so much reliance actually in this business on folks saying we can predict what the box office is going to be, but then everything becomes a fait accompli. So I think it's all about taking all of the data we have, whether it's that one nugget that came from the one tweet, or whether it is the the work that we're going to do to pre-screen a movie with you to help make the content better, or whether it's tracking during the campaign. And you just have to be a really smart user of data and understand what all the pieces are and how to help it guide your decision and not let it freak you out and make your decision for you.
To respond to you, Cheryl, it's funny how press works, how they latch onto a single headline, and whenever you mention the word predict with the phrase box office, that is what is going to grab attention. When we released the white paper, really what we wanted to do was to kind of open up the floodgates to what was previously sort of a privately guarded piece of data, Google search information. Social information, that's public. Studios have been using that information to inform their campaigns for a few years now. But at the end of the day, what we wanted to accomplish was not to prove that we have the most predictive model. We don't. What we do have is this information that you can use over time. And so what we've done for our studios is, we provide them a prediction. But more importantly, the important piece of data that we provide is kind of a weekly tracker on search information and search interest. And so that's kind of, I think, like you said, how can you make that data actionable? A prediction alone means nothing, but that information is kind of the way that we help our studios. So
that last mile of tracking is probably the least valuable thing we provide to our clients. It's the least, it comes so late in the game, it's very hard to do anything about it. It's basically, do I put the champagne on ice, or do I get the resume ready? What do I have to do going into the weekend? But that is the big sexy thing that everyone kind of focuses on. When we got into the game of box office estimations, we did it from a very practical reality that when we started 4 years ago, very few people believed that social was indicative of actual real world behavior, and there were, everyone would talk about the Scott Pilgrim versus the World effect. They would talk and point to these different films and say, those are the movies that create buzz, and the movies that actually open don't necessarily have buzz. And so you have to break these things apart. And that's one of the things that we wanted to really focus on. So we used the estimations as a matter of proof point that looking earlier in the process, using social to make smart decisions about your media spend, about the creative that you choose, about the cuts of the trailer that you employ, that ultimately it's on a train that has a connection to people actually voting with their wallet and going to the theater and plunking down money for a movie ticket. And it's not always right. It is an inexact science, and I'm sure we've all had fitful Friday nights of sleep, and Saturday mornings you look at the box office and you're surprised. But I know, at least in our world, I'm sure in yours as well, when you are surprised, that gives you an opportunity to learn, to see what you missed and get smarter and refine the process.
Because it may be the last mile of what you provide, but it also, I think, is very reflective of the road that you have traveled thus far. And for our confidence as marketers that are investing into whether research projects or whether we are investing into different media types, that we want to know how, because it's a predictor of how effective was our message and was our media. And one of the media types that we all grapple with, we all believe, we all instinctively feel it's very important, but buzz, what does it really mean? And is it a guide for us? Is it a guide for being smarter about campaigns, about is it really a predictor?
Yeah, I mean, what we've been able to find is that there is a strong correlation between the buzz around a film and its actual behavior at the box office. But you have to, in this industry, everyone talks about comps. You need comps to be able to have that context, to understand, is it big or is it not? I mean, everybody has been talking about The Purge and The Conjuring and Insidious 2 and these films that are micro-budgeted horror movies that blow up and surprise. But that didn't happen for Your Next. If you looked at the buzz around Your Next in isolation, or if you looked at it next to an adult comedy or a drama, it would have looked huge. But when you're able to look at it next to those other films, you're able to see now it's not as big, and we can right size. So we talk a lot about genre comps. We talk about specific film comps. So being able to understand not just buzz. It's not like if you get 3,000 tweets, boom, you're toast or you're great. That volume's going to shift. So when we're looking at Captain Phillips, we're looking back to Argo, trying to find those things, which is why, we have over 600 films that we've tracked since '09, and there were some times early on when we just didn't have enough data to be able to actually see if that buzz was truly predictive.
Does size matter within a genre?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
When have you been surprised?
Scream, the last Scream installment. The last Scream installment, which was 4 or 5, I can't remember. I've tried to flush it out of my memory. It was giant and social. Everyone was talking about the Scream franchise coming back. Everyone was so excited. It was a horror movie. What we didn't understand at the time, that it was horror with the added multiplier of nostalgia that was amplifying that buzz. We didn't have enough comps to be able to actually right size that information and see how big it was going to be. So we thought it was going to be open much larger than it ultimately did. What we were able to, in hindsight, learn was that there were a lot of people who grew up with the Scream franchise that were super excited that Scream was back, but instead of getting a babysitter and going to the movie theater, because they're now older and married with kids, they just watched Scream on basic cable that night instead of going to the theater. But we were able to use that information for American Reunion.
We're going to fight in a minute. I'm just kidding.
Well, we were able to use that information for American Reunion that came out a year later and understand the difference between what people were actually saying about the movie versus just remembering the fondness of the American Pie series.
So go ahead, Cheryl.
I just think, again, it's a case for having to look at it in context with other information versus by itself, right? So when we're taking our social guide data around movies, we're laying that right next to tracking data to understand that. And so we see that, certain genres, certain age groups move in one way with tracking, others move in another way with tracking, and it kind of ties in with the predictive discussion, right? You can't use any one of these pieces to purely be predictive. People say, oh, the tracking isn't predictive. It wasn't designed to be predictive. It was designed to help advance the marketing campaign and understand where it was working and not working, and then this sort of burden to become predictive gets put on it. But I think that you can never, first of all, no one's written the book yet on social, right? We're on like chapter 1, maybe chapter 2 or something. You might be on chapter 4 because you're doing it a long time. But there's a lot of chapters to come. So I don't think anybody knows it yet. And you've got to look at it relative to all these other pieces, again, to be able to use use your judgment.
Yeah. So there's a reality with, I think, everybody in the room, and certainly in my day-to-day, is budgets aren't getting any bigger. So as there's new opportunities that present themselves, and let's call that building a social following for a film or for a television show, although Laura left, I don't have to keep saying that, do I? No. So with that, there's a price. Everybody knows to build a social following costs money, and it can cost as little as a couple $100,000 or as much as $1 million, $1.5 million. Where should that come from?
Well, I mean, from my perspective, I think we measure the organic conversation, not necessarily the likes, the follows, the stuff that's the outbound social effort. It's just organically are people telling their friends and family and voting with that social currency that they want to go see this film, that they like this film, that they thought that ad was funny, repeating a line from a trailer. So we always are asked, what's that magic bullet? How do I improve the social buzz as you measure it around my films? And from our perspective, TV is still this wonderful instrument that is able to motivate people to talk. We see trailers released online, trailers in theaters, and television as still the biggest drivers of organic social buzz. So I don't think it's necessarily anything new or different or needs to be stolen from another budget. I think films can inherently have more things that are going to create social conversation pre-wired in. And Doug talked earlier about Kevin Hart, and certainly you can look at talent that way. Doug also had the film The Purge, which the actual content and the idea behind that film became a kind of a runaway conversation topic in social. But I don't know if it's necessarily you have to take from one to make it happen in the other.
Julie, I think you're trying to bait me into this
Maybe.
answer. But I think the reality is, there is, for all the great things that television provides, great awareness, great reach, unparalleled, there are areas of waste in television. The frequency, I mean, high television viewers, or kind of the top quartile, may see an ad many, many, many times, whereas someone who rarely turns on the television but is active online will not be served an ad necessarily on television. So there are gaps that digital can fill. On YouTube, all these video sites where kind of that core audience, males, females 18 to 34, this is sort of the sweet spot for digital to kind of reach that untapped audience. So in that sense, it's, I know how TV is bought. It's packaged up neatly, but if there was a way to sort of skim off the top to kind of switch to digital, I think it would make an impact.
So my bait was social. So is there with the money that's spent in social?
So I think it should come from publicity.
It's
Because it's word of mouth.
We'll let them know.
There you go. Tell them that. I also
I
do
have a call to make after this.
I do think you have to look at the paid, owned, and earned social elements too, right? I think we've got some folks here who are going to talk about Pretty Little Liars lately, and I mean, they are genius about how they take charge of their owned social media, right? And what they do to drive the conversation around that television show. So you can look at the different pieces. We're able to break out the Twitter handles for the organic stuff, and then the handles that the network and the talent and those folks own, if you will, if you want to call that owned media, right? And then the stuff that gets paid for. And one of the things that we're starting to do is we're launching something called Nielsen Twitter TV ratings. Sorry to make this sound like a sales pitch, but it's the first time that we're going to be able to take tweets and not just know the volume, but actually know who was exposed, right? So we're going to know how many people were actually exposed to my tweet, versus Ben's tweet, and versus the, the talent on a show. So you can start to actually quantify the value of some of that and see if the effort you're putting into your owned social is actually generating that kind of impression or reach volume and what you're getting from your organic tweet volume. And do you have certain influencers in your organic tweets that actually are worth going after in a different way because they drive a whole lot of reach or impressions? Because right now the best you could do is say, I tweeted, I have 500 followers, therefore did 500 people hear my tweet if it fell in the forest, and nobody was looking at their Twitter feed. So I think that, again, the story really is, again, being in the early chapters of this and understanding how we can develop the new metrics around this.
Well, I'm making a note about if a tweet fell in the forest. Do you hear it? That's genius. I'm going to use that tomorrow, and you will get credit. So you answered a bit of what actually the next question is, so thanks for jumping ahead, Cheryl. But let's talk about all the media metrics and measurement for those media metrics. So from a digital standpoint, we talk in click-throughs, we talk in views, view-through, engagement, likes, favorite, retweets. Am I missing anything, everybody? We want to add? Come on, guys. Okay. Will there ever be one standard methodology or measurement, or at least some sort of value assessment? So you answered what you guys are trying to solve for, the Twitter aspect of it, or if a tweet falls in the forest. But do you guys want to add to this about is there hope on the horizon?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say there's a metric. We have a framework that we talk about, right? And it applies to all types of media, whether it's TV or digital or social or whatever we're talking about, which is reach, resonance, and reaction, right? So for reach is, you got to know who is exposed and how many. So you have to know kind of the universe you're starting from, whether that is how much social interaction, or how many people saw my TV spots, or how many people saw my digital campaign, or any other kind of campaign. Doug talked about there not being a metric around digital, and actually there are definitely metrics that can tie digital to television through campaign ratings. The next piece is resonance, right? So now I know how many people were exposed, but did it resonate, right? Did it make them want to see my movie? Did it make them more aware, sort of the resonance around that? And the third is reaction, which is, did they take an action? Did that thing actually then cause them to either look up a showtime, buy a ticket online, go to the box office, any of those things? So I think that having a framework across all these media types, you don't need to have one methodology or one metric, but you can think about what are you trying to accomplish at this point in time in your campaign? Are you trying to just at least understand how many people you even had the opportunity to expose? Or are you trying to get to the box office number? And there's different times you want to do that. So I don't think it's about one metric, but I think it's about having a framework, I hate to use that McKinsey-like word or whatever, around what you're trying to solve for and trying to get the media types to align as much as possible.
Yeah. I don't think there will ever be, in the near future, I don't think there will be sort of the singular metric that all movie marketers look to when it comes to digital. I think the reality is that, different entities own key pieces of the data puzzle. Google and Yahoo, all those, we own the search information. Social information, a little bit easier to gather. Online ticketing information, that's guarded very closely by the Fandangos, the movie phones of the world. In order to really have a sort of full marketing loop view consolidated into one metric, all of these entities have to collaborate. Or Nielsen can just get them all in a room and collect them. So it's difficult. And I think just in general for digital marketing and analytics, it's hard to hit a moving target. Every single day, we get more and more data. And in addition to that, we are exposed to new types of data that we start to collect. And it's always, the measurement is always going to follow what is available to us in terms of data. So, unfortunately, I know this is not the answer that people in this room want to hear. It's not going to be, I don't think, solved quickly or in the near future.
Well, then let's drill down into one piece of it, because this came up in the last panel, and I found it very interesting when the question of digital video came up, and I think it was in reference, to Hulu. So as we shift more into online video viewing with performance, and we start looking at performances, we start looking at it across digital and across traditional means, like whether it be a television set. So it's really interesting the way people look at it. They can call something TV or they call it video, and I'm going to point at Nadeem, though you can't see him. In the class that I teach, they don't even think of it as a TV show. It's just a show. It doesn't matter where they watch it on their phone. Some people actually have cable, but it's because it's provided by the dorm. And they watch it on all these different platforms. I'll eventually get to the question. I'm speechifying right now. And they seem to know more about what is being advertised on the full episode players than they do, now I'm baiting you, on the short video. Because what I keep hearing from them is they want to keep hitting reload so they get the shortest advertising because they just want to watch something that's a couple minutes long. So have you guys seen a different kind of metric, or a different, not just numbers, but an engagement level type of metric from the traditional television to the full episode players, or VOD to short video? I don't know if I asked the question, but I think there's one in there somewhere.
We've definitely seen through work that we've done over several years now where we're looking at the resonance, right? That middle R. Are people actually, are those ads resonating? When we look at TV and the full episode players, what we see is that the full episode player probably does resonate a little bit more because people you have to sit through the ads, right? You can't fast forward through them. And they've made that choice and they're watching generally on their own in more of a lean forward situation. But what we really see is it's the combination of the two that lead to the highest amount of resonance, because then it's like any media mix, right? It's like the more different media types, as long as they're appropriate, that you add, the more impact you're going to have versus the same one over and over again. But we've definitely seen that proven over and over again in actual data.
Because the other feedback that I get is that when they see something's like 2 minutes, 3 minutes long, they'll get up and leave and go do something and come back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not talking about
I was helping you on that one. That was not baiting you.
I think, YouTube, we try to make it easy for the user to skip an ad. So that kind of, in its own right, that sort of speaks to the kind of intent for someone to see an ad when they actually don't skip. So I think that on its own is an interesting metric to see, what the engagement rates and the view-through rates are for that type of ad unit. So in addition to sort of these overall viewership metrics, you can layer on a lot of the social elements to it. How many times has this been shared? How many times after that initial share was it viewed? So how did this initial view spark the fire? So in that sense, online video can provide a more telling metric at times.
Do those tend to be our champions who go all the way through? Our champions for like the ones who are going to say, come on, let's go see the Heat this weekend. Or is that them? Are they the ones who go all the way through?
Certainly a case can be made. I think one of the findings that we had in the white paper was that people who viewed, the more activity that you had on trailer view 4 weeks out, kind of your core audience who are seeking out information early on, even before the television blitz starts, the more active that base is, the better chance you have going forward in your campaign. So I think there is a bit, I think the case can be made that those are the people that are your champions, your evangelists.
When you have consumer-directed media behavior, like you find with online video, we all in this room have a real advantage. We're not selling Swiffer wet jets. We're selling friggin' Sandra Bullock flying through space. Like, we've got stuff that audiences actually want to see.
We sold her swearing, by the way. She was not flying through space. She was a cop and cussed a lot.
But
we had a difference.
That's one of the, I think, the true advantages, and that's why I think that the creative element in the media behavior, especially with online video, there's a lot of freedom there. When we see in social people talk about, especially with the long form video players, oh my God, if I see that ad again, I'm going to kill somebody, because they're being forced to sit through it. I think that's an opportunity for creative to shake things up, try different pieces, make sure that people are seeing different cuts, that those cuts are really targeted to the show and the audience that's going to be attracted to that show. I think it gives a lot of creative freedom with online, that just because of the big, expensive, blunt instrument of television, it's harder to use.
But you know how hard that is for studios and trailer houses to just come up with all these cuts. It's not easy. In fact, that's the hardest job I think that anybody has at a studio, is taking a 2-hour film and condensing it into 15 seconds.
Yeah.
So to do that is difficult. Is that the same thing? Do you find that in television, Cheryl, that people are like, oh, I see this ad all the time, I just want to make it stop, make it go away, or is that an online behavior?
I think it's a little more of an online behavior, because I do think, first of all, people do have more control on television, right? If they feel that way, it is a lot easier to click, and it's an behavior, and it's all, again, it's about the quality of the creative, right? And I mean, look, we had the same job. So if it's a comedy, it's a different story. If you're telling the same joke over and over again, that gets old really fast. But with, a drama, it may be a little different because it's a little deeper story. So I hate to give the it depends answer, but I think it depends.
You did give the depends. I mean, the it depends. So I think we only have a couple minutes left, and there was one last question, and if we have a couple minutes extra, we'll take it out to the floor, I guess. No? Floor? No floor. Sorry, floor. You have been rejected, floor. So our general measurement, it seems like media is still in this, we still speak in this lowest common denominator of reach frequencies, which that just is a great transition to that. So we speak in reach frequencies. And we speak in our general tracking terms still as well. And then cost per seems to be something that is the newest addition to the lowest common denominator of what we do or how we talk. Can each of you just give us what you think is a prediction of how this measurement may change, whether it's at the end of a campaign, beginning of a campaign, mid-campaign, your prediction?
Well, it was something, I think the biggest change that we've seen over the last 6 months in our world is the rise of more visual conversation, and this idea of kind of a creative class of media consumption, where people aren't just taking stuff in and maybe even just giving 140 characters on Twitter about it. They're creating animated GIFs, they're creating Vines, they're talking about movies, but they're not talking, they're actually showing, and they're creating.
What would you call that?
For us, it's
make it up here and trademark it.
TM. It's going to be, I think it's really about the visual analytics of social. But it's so hard to quantify, because that's what we have. We have real people who are looking at these animated GIFs and understanding, are they being sarcastic, cynical? Is it funny? Are they liking this? But I think that you're seeing an entire generation, especially the under 20 crowd right now, that are using video and photos to communicate. And I think that's going to be the next great frontier for entertainment marketers, is how to capture that.
That's good. Cheryl?
So first of all, I think there's still and will continue to be a reason to look at reach and frequency and tracking and all of those things. There's a reason they've been tried and true for a long time. So I don't think those go away, and I don't think they're a bad word. You sort of talked about them as if they're bad words.
Oh, no, I have another set of bad words.
You know, so, oh, I know. But I think the real key, and it's very pragmatic for movie marketers who haven't quite gotten there, is straightforward ROI, real sales metrics to prove that the person who was exposed actually bought a ticket. And it's really hard to do that in the movie business because you don't control your chain, right? So you don't actually have that end of the line sales data to know who actually bought the ticket versus who was exposed. And there's bits and pieces of it in the Fandangos, but they own that, and there's little ways to get to it. Other types of marketers do that all the time now. And they can get to the actual end of the transaction, the path to purchase, and then what was the actual ROI. And I think that it's sort of the holy grail for the movie business. And if the studios and the distributors could figure out how to work together to make that data available, so I'm now in pure data geek mode, but if they could figure out how to make that data available so that you can actually understand for the heat, right? What was that path? Who was exposed to what? And yes, they bought a ticket. And this worked and this didn't, then that's going to give you a whole new level of insight that you don't have now.
I'm going to give you two predictions. The first one is not measurement related. I think that Jesse's going to kill Walt. Just throwing it out there. Second, measurement related. So I think that in the future state, there will be the ability for marketers to distinguish between the undecided and the unpersuadable. I think we're going to get smarter about audiences, and in that sense, when we start to make that distinction, our buys can become more targeted. When we say reach and frequency, we're not going to be talking about those metrics in specifics like age and gender. We'll be talking about truly unpersuadable males 18 to 24, things like that. So that is my prediction, optimistic prediction.
So I'm going to end on what I want you guys to do, given I'll never have you in a room again together. Maybe, I don't know, but let's assume not. For the theatrics of this, I would love someday to be able to see a measurement of finding our champions, because we know that one person who wants to go can equal 2, 4, 5, 10, 20 tickets. Those are, we need our champions. We need to find that, and how do we measure them? And that was a lot behind the numbers, the bigger the better, or do they always have to be so big? So quality of our folks, of our audience, would be my wish. So with my wish, please thank our panel. It was great to battle with you a little bit.